Father Ed Beniam. I'm the pastor here. I've been here, this is my 5th year. Can't believe it. Time flies when you're having fun. Down and out in Beverly Hills. And we're so blessed. This is the 3rd of a series. Father Alexei, the first time he came here, he talked about the Eastern Catholic churches. And the second time we talked about Christian unity. And this 3rd, he's going to open up a document from the Second Vatican Council, Nostra Aetate. He'll go all into that. It's the relationship of the Catholic Church with non-Christian religions. And so we're very blessed to have Father Alexei. So why don't we welcome him with a warm round of applause.
Thank you, Father Ed. It's a pleasure once again to be here. It's hard to believe that this is the 3rd section of this series that you put together, and I'm very grateful that you've done that, and hopefully it will be interesting for all of you tonight. So, as Father Ed said, we looked at things from an Eastern Christian point of view. We looked at things from an ecumenical point of view. Remember that we said the Catholic Church doesn't use the term ecumenical and interreligious interchangeably. When we talk about things ecumenical, we are referring to our relationship with our fellow Christians. And we looked at that in some detail last time I was here. Tonight we're going to look at another aspect of the Church's relationship with other peoples and people of faith and different faiths, those faiths being non-Christian. Of the Second Vatican Council's 16 major documents, over 100,000 words, by far the shortest is a document called Nostra Aetate. In our time, the Nostra Aetate, first 2 Latin words of the document. Also in English, the title is The Declaration on the Relationship of the Catholic Church to Non-Christian Faiths. This is the shortest of any of those documents. It's only 5 chapters. Only 5 chapters. Only 41 sentences. Wow. Only 41 sentences.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. Yet, this is by far the most revolutionary document of the Second Vatican Council, because it completely reoriented Catholic thinking towards people of non-Christian faiths. You thought the document on ecumenism was revolutionary? It's nothing compared to this. This is totally revolutionary. This document contains only the 2nd time in the history of the Catholic Church where the word dialogue appears. For 2 points and extra credit if you can guess this. Where was the first time that word dialogue appeared in a church document? You should know this, we talked about this before. Where was the first time the word dialogue appeared in a church document?
Township and Terra.
No, nice try. Nice try. It occurred in the document on ecumenism. That was the first time in the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church that the word dialogue appeared in any official document. And the 2nd time that it appeared is in the document we're going to look at tonight. Why is this so extraordinary? Because prior to this, as we talked about before, the Catholic Church was of the mentality that we were the sole possessors of the truth. So why should we dialogue with anyone else? Right? You can see the logic there. You can see the logic there. The logic is faulty, as we'll see tonight, but that was the mentality of the church. So let me give you a little background of this document. I mentioned that there were 5 chapters. The longest chapter is chapter 4. We're going to look at that in some detail. And that has to do with our relationship with the people of the Jewish faith. How did this document come into being? How did this come into being? First of all, this was promulgated as official teaching of the Catholic Church in October 28th of 1965. 1965, for those of you who are around then, some of you are not. Approximately 20 years or so after the Second World War. What was the major religious horror that happened during the Second World War? The Holocaust. Who was the Pope that summoned the Second Vatican Council?
John the 23rd.
John the 23rd. Do you know anything about his early life? John the 23rd, also known as Angelo Roncalli.
And also known as like the first Turkish pope.
Yes.
You were met in your class.
You give away all my lines. Before he was elected as Pope, Angelo Roncalli was Archbishop or Patriarch of Venice in Italy. Before that, he was the Vatican Diplomatic Service. He served in France, Bulgaria, and Turkey. He was in Turkey at the time of the Second World War. And there he facilitated the migration, if you will, of many Jews fleeing the Nazi horror in Eastern Europe through Turkey on the way to what was then known as Palestine, the British Mandate of Palestine, which today is the state of Israel and Palestine. So he had a first-hand knowledge of the Jewish people from his own interaction with them. This is very personal for me because I actually have been in the old nunciature in Istanbul. Before he was created, before John XXIII was made a saint of the Catholic Church, people could easily go in there. Now that he's made a saint, the nunciature, which is not there anymore, but now in the Turkish capital, Ankara, it restricts who enters there because they don't want people ripping off things. I have a relic of John XXIII. But for me personally, it was wonderful to be able to pray in the chapel where he prayed, to sit in his chair at the dining room table, to sit at his desk there, to just feel his presence. He was so accepted by the Turkish people that, as I told you in class, once he was elected Pope, the Turkish people claimed Angelo Roncalli as the first Turkish Pope. They even changed the name of the street in front of the nunciature to Avenue Roncalli, and it still exists there today. Today, again, if you wish to enter there, if you ever find yourself in that part of the world and you want to enter the old nunciature, you need the permission of the current papal nuncio, who happens to be a seminary classmate of mine. So if you need to go in there, just let me know. See what I can do. For a little offering. So, John XXIII becomes Pope. He's troubled by our relationship with the Jews because of what he experienced during the Holocaust. So he wishes then to have the church address what he termed the Jewish question. And that Jewish question was simply this: what, if anything, was the Catholic Church guilty of? What culpability did the Catholic Church have in leading up to, during the Holocaust? And what were we going to do about it thereafter? There was a French Jew by the name of Jules Isaac, an 81-year-old French Jew, who had been experimenting and had been bold enough in France to gather small groups of Catholic intellectuals and small groups of Jewish intellectuals, and they had begun interacting with one another, getting to know one another. And Jules Isaac went to the Vatican, somehow obtained an audience with John XXIII, confronted John XXIII, saying, "You and your church must do something to address the contempt that the Catholic Church is teaching against the Jews." Now, this certainly was not a universal concept. There had been individuals, and even the Council of Trent taught that the Jews were not collectively responsible for the death of Christ. But that teaching never filtered down to the man and woman in the pew. And today, sadly, still exists in some areas. I think I might have shared with you in class that my parish has a vacation Bible school sometimes during the summer, depending on how many kids are around. And we were having this vacation Bible school, and a young kid from the neighborhood joined us. And we were talking about something about the Jews, and this kid puts up his hand and said, "Now, Father, the Jews, they are the ones that killed Jesus, right?" Where is a kid in the 21st century getting that? At home, someone that was formed by the Catholic Church or another Christian denomination prior to the teachings of the Second Vatican Council. So John the 23rd liked what Jules Isaac told him. He sent Jules Isaac to a cardinal by the name of Augustin Bea, who had just been empowered to create the Pontifical Council for promoting Christian unity, and charged him and said, listen to this man, see what he says, see if you think he gives us any ideas about how we can deal with the Jewish question at the Second Vatican Council. Cardinal Bea met with him. He liked very much what he said. They drew up some drafts and set into motion the foundation for the document we're going to look at now. While this document, it's very interesting that this document wasn't voted upon by the bishops at the council until the very last session of the council, because there's a lot of give and take over this. How far should we go with this? And there was fear and opposition to the document, that fear coming primarily from Catholic bishops in the Middle East, who are serving in predominantly Muslim countries, where if the governments understood that we were changing our attitude towards the Jews, what would that mean for them? Do you think we have whistleblowers today? You should have lived then, folks. Because drafts of this document were leaked to the press, and there was a lot of turmoil, a lot of things. What we're experiencing in this country now is nothing compared to what this document was creating around the world. Nonetheless, the Council Fathers took this document, this draft, and fleshed it and expanded it, so it dealt not only with our relationship with the Jews, but with all other non-Christian faiths, symbolized by those others that they included in the document itself. When the document ultimately came to the council floor for a final vote, it was overwhelmingly passed. 2,221 votes yes, and only 88 no. Clearly showing that the Holy Spirit had inspired these bishops to move the church beyond where we had been regarding non-Christian faiths, and to embrace the whole type of interreligious dialogue that it sparked. I said the document itself is revolutionary. What's even more revolutionary is the movement it engendered. I wouldn't be an interreligious officer for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles without this document. These positions didn't exist until this document was formulated and passed and promulgated by the Pope. And I'm very happy to say that Los Angeles has taken the lead in the Western United States to implement it. So, Sandra, you have, just checking to see whether you're following. You have the document. Let's take a quick look at some of the main sections of it. Again, it's short, 5 paragraphs. We're going to look at just a few. Oops. Things are getting wild. Now, a word of caution before we begin. Sandra, you took this from the Vatican website?
I did.
Yeah, so this is the official Vatican translation. Ladies, it's still in rather masculine language. So when we come to certain segments, I'm going to add it, you as well, okay? I will say men and women, even though the document only says men. Doesn't mean that the document only applies to males, it applies to all of us, okay? Everyone have one? Okay. In my opinion, I'm going to highlight now certain sections of the document which I find most revolutionary and actually most rewarding at the same time. Let's look at, everyone find paragraph 2, or section 2. Begins with the words from ancient times down to the present. Everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, go down to the next paragraph, and go down towards the bottom where you see bolder print. Okay? Now listen to these words and follow along. The Catholic Church rejects nothing that is true and holy in these religions. Stop right there. Stop right there. I thought we were the sole possessors of the truth. And now we're acknowledging that there's things true and holy in non-Christian religions. But we are. And we do. We are and we do. The Catholic Church rejects nothing that is true and holy in these religions. She regards with sincere reverence those ways of conduct and of life, those precepts and teachings which, though differing in many aspects from the ones she holds and sets forth, nonetheless often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men and women. What's that ray of truth which enlightens all men and women? Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Indeed, she, the church, proclaims and ever must proclaim Christ the way, the truth, and the life, in whom men and women find the fullness of religious life, in whom God has reconciled all things to himself. Next page. The church therefore exhorts her sons and daughters, that through dialogue, there's the occurrence of that word, second time in church history, that's where it occurs, that through dialogue and collaboration with followers of other religions, carried out with prudence and love, and in witness to the Christian faith and life, they recognize, preserve, promote the good things, spiritual and moral, as well as the social cultural values found among these men and women. Again, a very revolutionary statement, and a very powerful statement. We recognize that there is truth in non-Christian faiths. We as Catholics are bound to proclaim Christ, as it says there, the way, the truth, and the life. And there are various ways of proclaiming Christ. The best way to proclaim Christ is by, ladies and gentlemen, by your life. 2 points, Father Ed. Very good. By your life. Where did Christians first earn the name Christian? You know the Bible, so you can't answer. Antioch, yes. Book of Acts. Why were they called Christian? Because the people there saw in their lives something that reminded them of Jesus Christ. Okay? I'm going to tell you a story about a Hindu. You must watch the time. Some years ago, our Hindu Catholic dialogue here had a public session open to the public on forgiveness. What's forgiveness from a Hindu point of view? What's forgiveness from a Catholic point of view? And there were some swamis here from India, and they were attending. What is a swami? Swami is a Hindu holy person, holy monk, we would say, prayer leader. And we told the story of a Baptist missionary family in India. Man, 2 sons, and his wife. The wife stayed in New Delhi. The 3 males got in their van one day and drove to some remote village where they were going to preach the next day. They arrived early, so they parked the van, and slept in the van overnight. In every faith, there are radical people. There were Hindu radicals who knew they were coming, spotted the van, and in the middle of the night, they went to the van and set the van on fire and killed the man and his 2 sons. Horrendous, absolutely horrendous. The wife, when she heard about this, was urged to flee, to leave. Rather than flee, she took her Christian faith very seriously when it came to forgiveness. She went on Indian state radio and publicly forgave the people who killed her husband and children. This Swami, when he heard it, said that he immediately got on a train, traveled 9 hours by train to come and see this woman. And when I asked him, why did you do this? He said, I will never be able to quite do the Indian accent, but something like the follow. We Hindus look for God everywhere. Sometimes we find them, sometimes we don't. But in this woman, we have seen something of the Christ. That's how we proclaim Christ. Best. We can sit and argue all we want. We can quote texts and other people can quote texts. The best thing is by your example, the way you live our Christian faith. Okay? Well, let's continue. Any questions, sir? Please don't hesitate. Because I realize this might be new for many of you, as it certainly was for me many years ago.
This lady is late, so.
You're late! She pointed out I was perfectly willing to overlook her tardiness. I was perfectly willing to overlook her tardiness. I told you that the genesis of this document is the idea of dealing with the Jewish question. We're going to get to that in a moment. The document also mentions 3 other non-Christian faiths: Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. Why those 3? Why those 3? And why is Buddhism included? Is Buddhism a religion or is it a philosophy?
Philosophy.
How many of you think it's a philosophy? How many of you think it's a religion? How many of you think it's both? That's why the church included it here, okay? It's by many of its own adherents. Many Buddhists will tell you, oh no, Father, it's a philosophy, Buddhist philosophy. But they live it and they practice it as a religion. And since many bishops were from Asia, at the time of writing this document, that's why it's included. Okay? Same thing with Hinduism. Hinduism is definitely a religion. It's included here. But notice the first line of section 3. The church regards with esteem also the Muslims. Stop right there, folks. Stop right there. Pretend Father Ed is not here. When is the last time you heard one of our Catholic priests tell you that? Never. Official teaching of the Catholic Church, promulgated by Paul VI in 1965. Think of how different the world might be if we Catholics had been living that since 1965. We regard with esteem also the Muslims. They adore the one God, living and subsisting in himself, merciful and all-powerful, the creator of heaven and earth, has spoken to men and women. They take pains to submit wholeheartedly to even his inscrutable decrees, just as Abraham, with whom the faith of Islam takes pleasure in linking itself, submitted to God. Very important now, the next sentence. Though they do not acknowledge Jesus as God, they revere him as a prophet. Did you know that?
Yes.
Yeah. They have great respect. Whenever they mention the name of the prophet, for example, Muhammad, they will always say, peace be upon him. Muhammad, peace be upon him, did this and this. Jesus, peace be upon him, did this, that type of thing. They also honor Mary. Where's the lady with the Mary customs here? Yes, you. They also honor Mary, his Virgin Mother. At times they even call upon her with devotion. If you go, last Lent, I did a series of presentations on Islam and Mary, Muslims and Mary. Are there any similarities? I think you'd be fascinated to hear that there are. There are shrines in Lebanon and in Syria, for example, where Muslim women will go particularly, sometimes accompanied by their husbands, to pray. They sometimes light candles in front of the various icons and statues. Why? Because they want to conceive. They want to have a child, and they're having difficulty doing so. In Lebanon, March the 25th, which is the Feast of the Annunciation to Mary, has become a national holiday and the instigation for this national holiday came from, not from the Catholic Church, but from a Muslim in Lebanon, saying this is that in the Quran there's a whole chapter about Mary, and there's a version of the Annunciation story, not identical to that in the Bible, but similar. And this man then presented this to the parliament in Beirut, and they voted to accept this. It's a national holiday now that Muslims and Catholics today celebrate in Lebanon, a national holiday in honor of Mary's Annunciation. Right. And I'm not going to give you my whole presentation here in case you invite me back to do that here another time. Another time. I was hoping you would go to the powder room or something. Okay, we'll continue. In addition, they await the day of judgment when God will render their deserts to all those who have raised up from the dead. That certainly sounds very Catholic doctrine to me. Finally, they value the moral life and worship God, especially through prayer, almsgiving, and fasting. Remind you of anything?
Yes.
Our Lenten periods, prayer, almsgiving, and fasting. Okay? Now, this next paragraph was definitely written by someone in the Vatican diplomatic corps. Since in the course of centuries, not a few quarrels and hostilities have arisen between Christians and Muslims. Vatican diplomatic corps, definitely. This sacred synod, meaning the Second Vatican Council, urges all to forget the past and to work sincerely for mutual understanding and to preserve as well as to promote together for the benefit of all mankind, social justice and moral welfare, as well as peace and freedom. Very powerful statements. Yeah. Many of us tend to live in the past. We've got to let the past go. Not only with our Muslim friends here, but also when we talked about things ecumenical. Remember, I think I quoted to you a passage from Pope Francis when he apologized to Christians other than Catholics who had been harmed by our Catholic people, and asked forgiveness from them for us as well. We have to let go of the past. We learn from the past. We don't set ourselves to be hurt again, but we don't stay there. We have to move on. Okay, we'll come back to look at some of the things. What I'm going to do, we're going to complete looking at the document, and then I'm going to share with you some ways that we implement this document here in Los Angeles. All right. Now, section 4, which is this is the core section. This dealt with the Jewish question. Look at the third paragraph, beginning with the words "the church." Everyone see that?
Yes.
The church keeps ever in mind the words of the apostle about his kinsman. Which apostle? Paul. Very good, Father. 2 more points. Theirs is the sonship and the glory and the covenants and the law and the worship and the promises. Theirs are the fathers, and from them is the Christ according to the flesh. It's Paul's letter to the Romans. The Son of the Virgin Mary. There's, according to the flesh, the Son of the Virgin Mary. She, the church, also recalls that the apostles, the church's mainstay and pillars, as well as most of the early disciples who proclaimed Christ's gospel to the world, sprang from the Jewish people. I have a friend who teaches theology at Georgetown University. And a few years ago, the first day of class, he went up to the board like this, a whiteboard, and wrote, "Jesus was a Jew." There was a young woman in the class who said, "Erase that, that's not true." What Bible is she reading? Was he born Christian? Come on. We acknowledge, and we take our Jewish roots seriously. That's exactly what Jewel Isaac was trying to get John the 23rd to emphasize. If we did that, then we wouldn't have taught some of the horrendous things that the church taught about Jews over the centuries. After the church and the synagogue and temple eventually split, you know from your reading, hopefully, of the scriptures that the early Christians would go to synagogue and go to temple and pray. And then after they would do that, then they would gather for what was termed the breaking of the bread. Then what we know today as the Mass. But they would first go to the synagogue. Many of them, Peter insisted that Gentile converts to Christianity, gentlemen be wary, would have to be circumcised. Even though they were Gentiles. They would have to become Jews first, in other words, and then they could be received into the Christian church. We take those roots very seriously. And then for later church fathers, and I'll get into that in a moment, to write some of the horrific things that they said about the Jews. It's just unconscionable that we let that go on as long as we did. And a lot of those things that we taught, a lot of things that the early church fathers wrote, then people in the time of the Second World War used to incite the hatred of the Jewish people. Come back to that. Next paragraph. As the Holy Scripture testifies, Jerusalem did not recognize the time of her visitation when Jesus, the Savior, arrived. Nor did the Jews in large number accept the gospel. Indeed, not a few opposed its spreading. Nevertheless, God holds the Jews most dear for the sake of their fathers. He does not repent of the gifts he makes or of the calls he issues. Such is the witness of the apostle. Again, that's Paul. In company with the prophets and the same apostle, the church awaits that day known to God alone, on which all peoples will address the Lord in a single voice and serve him shoulder to shoulder. Okay. Now, the real meat of the document, next page. Since the spiritual patrimony common to Christians and Jews is thus so great, this synod, the Second Vatican Council, wants to foster and recommend that mutual understanding and respect, which is the fruit above all of biblical and theological studies, as well as of fraternal dialogue. That word again appears. True, the Jewish authorities and those who follow their lead pressed for the death of Christ. Still, what happened in his passion cannot be charged against all the Jews without distinction, then alive, nor against the Jews of today. Although the church is the new people of God, the Jews should not be presented as rejected or cursed by God, as if this followed from the Holy Scriptures. All should see to it then, that in catechetical work, or in preaching the Word of God, they do not teach anything that does not conform to the truth of the gospel and the Spirit of Christ. Again, for centuries, people were taught, even if it wasn't the official teaching of the church, that their thoughts were never challenged, that they blamed the Jews for the death of Christ, the so-called deicide charge. I speak often in Jewish synagogues and temples here in the Los Angeles Archdiocese area. Almost every time I'm there, someone will come up to me and say, you know, Father, when I was a kid and I would pass by one of your Catholic schools, kids would come up to the fence and point to me outside and said, there goes a Christ killer. And your nuns and priests in the yards did nothing to stop that. That's horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. We believe that Christ freely accepted his passion and death for our salvation. Right? We believe that. And yet, somehow, we morphed over the centuries into having a scapegoat. Jews did this. Christ killers. So we have to be very careful. Those of you in preaching positions, I remember telling you in class, be careful on how the Jews are presented, particularly during Holy Week. I don't know if you have one of these, the live stations of the cross where they act it like a play. No, maybe just as well. I don't want you to report me to your parish council about if they're trying to do that, but some of them are horrendous. Some of the stereotypical images that come out in these things, some of the stereotypical wording that comes out, they obviously have not read this document. So you have to be very careful of this. Very careful of this.
I remember when I came back to church after 34 years being away, I left in those 60s times. The first Good Friday, remember being still in the missal. The Jews at the crucifixion, the death and passion, the Jews are not responsible for Jesus' death. Right there in our missals it said.
Good.
And
Good.
I just went, yes.
Yeah. But that wasn't always there.
No, it wasn't always there. It wasn't there when I left. It wasn't there, I don't think, for years.
Some of you may remember the old liturgy of the church up until it was reformed by the Second Vatican Council. Well, let me tell you another story, and this is true. When John the 23rd, as Pope, was newly elected and going to celebrate the Good Friday service for the first time as Pope, he goes into the sacristy at St. Peter's Basilica and asks to see the service book. And this is very unusual. So the Monsignori would go up to him and they're afraid. What do we want to look at this for? Everything is set. What do we have to look for? Those of you who are in ministry know that any last minute changes throw panic into these people. So he's looking at it and he's reading the prayers. And then he asked for a pen. And then they get Monsignor get really the Pope wants a pen? So of course that's a look all over, try to find what to find when to bring it to him. And he comes to that prayer, and this was definitely in the old liturgy. I remember this from the old liturgy. There was a prayer for the Jews. We were praying for their conversion on Good Friday. Obviously linking them to the death of Christ. And John the 23rd took the pen and scratched that prayer out and wrote in the Italian word basta, meaning nothingness. In nothingness. And that prayer, during the liturgical reform then initiated by the council was certainly dropped. You may also recall that when Pope Benedict XVI authorized a resumption of the use of that liturgy for people who wanted it, the Vatican people did not do the background checks, and they didn't really look at that clearly. And so they reissued the text with that in Latin, with that old prayer in it. The Jewish people went berserk. And I understand that. They were saying, so all of the rapprochement and the acceptance of one another, everything we've been working for since the Second Vatican Council has been negated if they can still pray for our conversion. Mm-hmm. And for the first time in history, a Pope changed the wording of a Catholic prayer at the insistence of a non-Christian entity like the Jews. And he pulled that prayer from the Latin text, wrote another one. I would have written it a little bit differently, but I'm not the Pope. He did, and he put it in. First time in history that the Catholic Church has changed one of its liturgical prayers at the insistence of a non-Christian faith. Okay. I'm sorry, you had a question.
Okay, I asked this question with some trepidation. It's not meant to be too pushback, but I do recall attending would be an Eastern Rites ceremony on Good Friday. St. John Chrysostom version of it, I believe. And part of it was, okay, and this happened to Jesus, and then the refrain from the community was, beware Jews. Da, 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 da.
Yes, exactly.
Beware Jews.
Yeah.
Must admit, I'm sure it was not intended, but I must admit if I were a rabbi,
No, you know, this is, and I'm Eastern, so I can, accept the criticism. We haven't done the due diligence on the texts of Good Friday that the our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters have done. We still have some cleaning up to do. In my own parish, you shouldn't be recording this, but
You get the idea.
you get the idea. I should say we cough at that time when we don't use those terms. We don't use those verses. And very interestingly, a few years ago, the Greek Orthodox, or our elder brothers and sisters in the Eastern world, in Jerusalem, signed a petition asking their patriarch to remove those verses from the Good Friday services in Jerusalem. So the spirit is alive and moving. Spirit is alive and moving.
The Russian too?
Sorry?
The Russian also?
Well, right now, you know, there's a friction between Moscow and Jerusalem and Constantinople. Hopefully, they will all do that together. Hopefully, they will all do that together. Okay. So please, and if you hear people, please, if you hear our Catholic people blaming the Jews for the death of Christ, just remember what we just read. Yes, the gospel is clear. John is clear that the leaders of the Jews pressed for the death of Jesus. But that doesn't mean every possible Jew that existed before that time, or since that time, or at that time, can be held responsible. So let's call people on that.
I did do this, I mean, it's.
And you live to tell about it.
No, it's maybe 10 or 15 years ago in this parish, before Father Ed was here. I think he knows the story. There was a parishioner who was anti-Semitic, and she was from a country that is known as being so, but I don't especially believe that because I visited these countries several times. And they have got big resurgence trying to understand and make some outreach. So, you know, I started very calmly. I said, you know, this is not appropriate. You know, my late husband, he was Jewish. She said, oh, that is different. Finally, it was too much. She was going off. Another parishioner said, no, I mean, really virulent anti-Semitic things. And another parishioner who was probably voted to Trump, if she's still around, said, how can you say that? Jesus was a Jew. And I just jumped in there and I said, you're always revering Mary, and Mary was a Jewish mother. And this person would follow me and try to attack me physically and verbally.
Fortunately, or I should say fortunately they didn't. Hopefully that wouldn't happen again.
Au contraire.
Yeah.
But
She's taken martial arts, so don't mess with her. Yes, you did. I knew it. Very good. Very good. You know, again, in my little parish, there is a guy who maintains that I'm too easy on the Jews. He comes from another culture, another world, was part of the church in that culture, then left the church during the whole time of the Second Vatican Council and subsequently, and now has come back and still has a mentality that existed before the Second Vatican Council. So whenever I say something the least bit positive about the Jewish people, I hear from him. I hear from him.
and how do you communicate with him? I mean, how do you?
I always bring out a pocket version of this.
Small print.
You know, we had they're not there now, but a Greek Catholic guy fell in love with a Jewish woman who was studying to be a rabbi. And that love matured, and they wanted to get married. So they came and chatted with me, and I said, well, this is very interesting, you know, there's a lot of questions answered. And ultimately they did get married. And she came dutifully with him to liturgy on Sunday, and he went dutifully with her to the synagogue on Friday night. I went and saw her, and she even sang in our choir for a while. I often wonder what she dealt with those some of those texts can be, if you don't know what they're really saying, they can be outwardly a little jarring. I saw her lighting a candle in front of an icon of Mary. And so I went up to her and I said, Cheryl, do you mind telling me, what are you doing? And she said, look, Father, she was a Jewish mother. I'm about to be a Jewish mother. We can relate. Okay? This is the intent of all this. This is the intent of all this. Okay? Let's just finish with that and then I'll give you some ideas of how we implement this. Besides, the last sentence in section 4. Besides, as the church has always held and holds now, Christ underwent his passion and death freely because of the sins of men and women and out of infinite love, in order that all may reach salvation. It is therefore the burden of the church's preaching to proclaim the cross of Christ as the sign of God's all-embracing love and as the fountain from which every grace flows. Okay? Christ freely accepted his passion and death. Freely. And then the final statement there, at the beginning of the last paragraph, also very important. The church reproves as foreign to the mind of Christ any discrimination against men or women or harassment of them because of their race, color, condition of life, or religion. On the contrary, following the footsteps of the holy apostles Peter and Paul, this sacred synod ardently implores the Christian faithful to maintain good fellowship among the nations, and if possible, to live for their part in peace with all men and women, so that they may truly be sons and daughters of the Father who is in heaven. Okay? Foreign to the mind of Christ. Powerful statement there. Foreign to the mind of Christ, any discrimination against people or harassment of them because of their race, color, condition, or life or religion. Okay. So here we have the template. Here you have the blueprint. How do we enflesh that here in Los Angeles? Well, we do that in a variety of ways. First of all, since the core of the document was about the Jews, we first of all established this before my time here, established a multifaceted relationship with the Jewish community. We have Jewish Catholic women in dialogue. Once a month they meet and they discuss, they have sharing on different aspects of faith. They take the text or a writing by one of their spiritual writers or one of our spiritual writers. They look at it, they study it, they share about it, and they plan an annual conference each year. That conference is this coming Monday out at Louisville High School. We alternate sites between a Catholic site and a Jewish site. They will have probably around 200 women and one guy, that's me, who dutifully goes all of these things as part of my ministry here. And they will have presenters and a cultural exchange. There will be a Catholic cantor and a Jewish cantor, each singing from the various traditions, and then singing something together at the end of their time period. They will have lunch together, and then they will have dialogue together, where they will sit and there'll be, there's never an equal number of Jewish women and Catholic women because there are more Catholics here than there are Jews. But they try to get as close to that as possible. And the great benefit is, what I've determined over the years, the great benefit of this is not just the theological discussions they have, but that they see each other as wanting the same thing for their families and for their friends. And they have developed wonderful friendships together. There's a bonding that's taking place there between these women. We have educational programs where the Archdiocese partners with the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, in a program called Bearing Fruit. What this is we take a select number of secondary school teachers, or perhaps the entire staff and faculty of a secondary school, as an in-service day, and then a rabbi and I present on everything leading up to and Catholic culpability in the Holocaust, how to deal with anti-Semitism or bullying of any kind in the classroom, and steps beyond, what steps can be taken beyond that. Teachers are given by the ADL what do you call this? Certainly a packet, but the packet has lesson plans and resources, and very often we make available to them a survivor of the Holocaust to come and speak in the classroom if they wish. It's a powerful experience to be with a survivor of the Holocaust. We look at what I do in looking at church history. I look at some of the writings of the early church fathers, Ambrose and John Chrysostom and Gregory Nisan, these people, Mileto of Sardis, and trying to explain where they're coming from and why they wrote the way they did. And we look at the things they wrote, and it's no wonder then that the people developed such a hatred for the Jews based on what their religious teachers were telling them in these writings. There's also a program which we partner with the Jewish Federation here called the Holy Land Democracy Project. What happens here is that the Jewish Federation used to be just for Catholic teachers, secondary school teachers. They would take a select number of our teachers to Israel for 11 days or so, and they would immerse them in Israeli life and equip them then to teach about Israel and teach about the Jewish faith, and come back then and also gave them some lesson plans and some ideas. They were then to create art projects or something like this in their classroom, and then there would be a contest amongst all the students. It was a good thing. That program now has expanded to include not just secondary Catholic school students, teachers, but the secular schools as well. I have criticism of that program, and I know that you're recording this, and just so that you're aware, the Jewish Federation knows that I have this criticism of the program. In fact, one of their gentlemen is called just Friday and asked to meet with me about this. So I'm not just talking out around the corner here. I think, and I've been to Israel many times, I think if you're going to go to Israel, especially if you're going to teach about Israel, you should be exposed to all aspects of Israeli life, and not every Israeli is Jewish. 20% of their population is Palestinian, and a large percentage of that 20% Palestinian population is Christian. These people that go with the Holy Land Democracy Project have no interaction with our Christian people, and I think that's wrong. I think that has to be amended, and if that were amended, then I would be 100% in favor of the program. We also have a priest-rabbi dialogue. If you have nothing to do, Ed, why don't you come? We have the lap of luxury here in Beverly Hills. We have free time, and we meet up here at the American Jewish University. Much closer for you to get there than it is for me. Priests and rabbis gather every month during the academic year. We have discussed a variety of topics. Sabbath. What is the Sabbath? And are we observing it? Are we observing it? Yeah, I like the way you're shaking. Not really. Not really. The Sabbath is the Lord's day. And we do many things that are not lordly on the Lord's day. Right? So that's something we can learn from it. We actually wrote a book together. The idea was that we would write small, like a magazine-style article, and then have question and answers, suggested discussion points at the end of the article. The idea was we use this as a tool for partnering the synagogue and parish, like you have this growing budding relationship with the Sinai Temple here, where you could put some of your people, some of their people together. You could engage in interreligious learning, or you would learn about the other from the other. I can't speak for the rabbis, but I could. But I can for the priests. They got very wordy. Those little magazine-style articles are now a 1,000-page book. We tried to get a publisher to publish this. Nobody is going to read a 1,000-page book, right? Nobody will publish it. So what we're doing now, we've gone back and we're taking certain segments of that and making them into little 12-minute videos on YouTube and places like this, where you can now access them and still have your gathering, your partnership, and use them as a way of facilitating a discussion and dialogue. We have a Jewish Studies program at Loyola Marymount University. Catholic University, yet there's a Jewish Studies program there. I'm part of that, I'm on the board of that, along with a couple other boards over there. And I only teach one class, or co-teach a course there. The course is called Literature and Faith in the Holy Land. We take Jewish and Christian, not just Catholic, but Christian students of all ilks, and immerse them, and we explore the Holy Land through the lenses of literature, which Professor Holowitsky teaches, and faith, which a rabbi and I teach. We expose these young people to things Jewish, things Christian, things Muslim, things Druze, and Baha'i, major faiths there. Most of these, many, I shouldn't say all, certainly not say all, many of these young people are non-observant. You know, they're nominally Jews, nominally Christian. This year we had one nominal Muslim with us. But the idea is to take them back to their roots and spark some type of religious awakening. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This last time, 6 of the people who were Christian, either Catholic or not, wished to be baptized in the Jordan River by me. If they're a Catholic, they were, renewing their baptism. If they were a Christian, they were being baptized. It was a wonderful experience. Wonderful experience. There are situations where there are actual good relationships developed between a neighboring synagogue and a neighboring Catholic parish. For example, in the San Fernando Valley, St. Bernardine of Siena and Temple, the name escapes me, it's not a dot Ariel, but it's Temple. They're a parking lot across from each other. And they've had a long and very vibrant relationship for many years now. They have Bible study together. Can you imagine looking at what we term the Old Testament and contrasting, comparing the Catholic approach to that, Christian approach to that, and the Jewish approach to that? They also look at New Testament texts, but it's just a very enriching endeavor. They also have pulpit exchange, where the rabbi comes and speaks after Mass on Sundays. Not as a sermon, but as a reflection afterwards. And the priest goes to the temple and speaks at the Shabbat service on Saturday. We have other such geographical possibilities. Sometimes our priests are not so open to doing this. One in particular, I'm not going to tell you where. There's been a change in pastor there, and there's been a change in the rabbi. So we're very hopeful now that this will actually take place there as well. They're literally across the street from one another. Okay. So these are all possibilities. You know that Pope Francis, when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, had a tremendous relationship with the Jewish community there. That was a big fear. You remember when Pope Benedict abdicated, said that he was going to retire, and the speculation was that the new Pope would come from Africa or South America? The Jewish community here was actually fearful of that. Now, why would they be fearful of that? They were fearful of that because previous popes, certainly in the last century, had all had the lived experience with Jews. But there are not many Jews in Central America. There are very few Jews in South America, and very few in Africa. So the Jewish community here expressed that to me. We're concerned about this, because a new pope could just say, well, this is all well and good, but we're not going to emphasize this anymore. Let's move on to something else. And then when Jorge Bergoglio is announced, the Archbishop of Buenos Aires is announced as the new pope, they breathed a sigh of relief, because he had such a tremendous relationship with Rabbi Sorka there, that all their fears vanished. as Archbishop, Pope Francis met regularly with Rabbi Sorka. They wrote a book together. I used the book as a Lenten reading in our parish. They did radio programs together. They stood by each other. It was absolutely excellent. I had the privilege of meeting Rabbi Sorka when he was here in Los Angeles, and I understand he's coming again soon, and we hope to have that same type of interaction with him here. When Pope Francis went to and apparently he and Rabbi Sorka and the Muslim Imam in Buenos Aires had never been to the Holy Land. And they made a pact amongst themselves. Should anyone go, the other two will come along. Well, Pope Francis went, a few years ago. And so when he made the plans to go, he, as he's prone to do, gets on the phone and calls his friend Rabbi Sorka and the Imam and says, I'm going, why don't you come with me? And they did. They did. First time in papal history that something like that has happened. So that gives you an idea of the very vast encounters we have with the Jewish community. Los Angeles, you may or not be aware, Los Angeles has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. Not New York. Not New York. They might have the largest Orthodox Jewish population. But there are different the Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist. We probably have more of the latter three. But this is the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. We've had some challenges, but because of our relationship with one another, we're able to sit down and peacefully resolve those challenges. There was also a great deal of fear when that movie, The Passion of the Christ, came out a few years ago, Mel Gibson's work. The Jewish community came to me and said, Father, you've got to stop this. You've got to stop the release of this film. I said, well, you give me a lot more credit than and so I said, well, let's do this. Let's try another approach here. Let's, if I can arrange for a showing of this film, how about you get a couple of rabbis, I'll get a couple of priests, you bring a Jewish film critic, I'll bring a Catholic film critic. We'll look at this film together, and we, for our part, in our Catholic periodical at that time, The Tidings, we will print whatever the Jewish film critic says, without altering it at all, and we'll print alongside of it what our Catholic film critic says. So we did this. I was biting my nails throughout the whole thing. And it worked. Because, and I prefaced that issue of The Tidings by writing an article on what a passion play, or what a depiction of the passion should have in it, and what it should not have in it. So we were trying to be proactive here. And it worked. And it worked. The Jewish film critic didn't see many things which he thought were overtly anti-Semitic, and nor did our film critic. Certainly there's different ways you can interpret that film, but to be overtly anti-Semitic, neither of them saw that. And so that alleviated the fears of a lot of the Jewish community here. Moving on to our relationship with Islam. We are trying to develop a similar, multifaceted relationship with them. This is more challenging because we haven't been at it as long as we have with the Jews. So we have a national Catholic Muslim dialogue. I am the representative of the Catholic ecumenical officers involved in this work up from the West Coast. We meet in March in Chicago usually. We also have a local Muslim Catholic dialogue. And this needs work. So what we're trying to do here, we're trying to do a couple of things. We've been looking at different topics, different things such as prophets. What does the word prophet mean to a Muslim? What does the word prophet mean to a Catholic? What's the role of narrative? What's the role of narrative in the Bible? What's the role of narrative in the Quran? Is there narrative in the Quran? That type of thing. And that has marginal results because there's not a lot of filter down. So what we're trying to do now, in the western part of the United States, is we're trying to partner Muslims and Catholics to look at the film St. Francis of Assisi and the Sultan. You may have seen that. If you haven't, you should. There are two versions, a Muslim version and a Franciscan version. Miraculously, they both say basically the same thing, with slight variations, but those variations are slight. It's a story of how Francis of Assisi goes to see Sultan Malik at the end of the Fifth Crusade, trying to bring a halt to the slaughter of people. And Francis goes there, admittedly, with two intentions, with two ideas. Either he's going to convert the Sultan to Catholicism, which obviously didn't happen, or he's going to die a martyr, which obviously didn't happen. What did happen is that for some reason these two men clicked. And although we don't have the minutes of what was said, they spent some days together interacting with one another, learning from one another what the other man felt and thought and believed. And during their interaction, hostility stopped. And it's that sets kind of a template for our interaction with the Muslim community today. If we can just interact and get to know one another. A lot of the work that I do in the whole field of interfaith relations and ecumenical relations are personal relationships. You have to develop a personal relationship with people, which means you have to put a face on religion. And not paint with a wide brush. You have to put a face on it. We've shown that film in the archdiocese maybe 4 or 5 times since our last regional meeting. With varied results, it's hard to get people out to see things like this, you know. The film isn't that long, it's about an hour, and then you have a little discussion group afterwards, but finding the right mix has been hard so far. But we're still working on that. We also participate with the Muslim community and in a number of interreligious councils and such. This last Tuesday, I was on a panel at a conference on ecological concerns in seminary training, and there was also a Muslim presenter as well. So and I happen to know him, so we were able to interact pretty well together, things like that. What else about we don't have at Royal Marymount, we don't have an Islamic studies program as we have a Jewish studies program, but there is a gentleman, Amir Hussein, who teaches courses on introduction to Islam there as an education for people, and he's very well received and does a marvelous job. What about non-Abrahamic faiths? Do we have any interaction with Hindus and Buddhists? Yes, we do. We have a bilateral, meaning one Hindus, Catholics, Buddhists, Catholics, dialogue with both of them. They both take basically the same stand, same mode. We pick a topic, and then we'll discuss that topic for a year. And at the end of that year, then we will have some type of public event to which we share what we've learned about each other and from each other at the end of that. One of the most successful Hindu Catholic dialogues we've had was end-of-life issues. End-of-life issues. Okay. How does your community approach end-of-life? How does your community approach end-of-life? What does that mean for you? Because it means something different, right? Hindus believe in rebirth or reincarnation. We don't. Does that impact the way that they prepare a person for death? Does that impact the way a person dies? And it does. And very interestingly, the majority of people who came to our public event that year were hospital chaplains, especially from our Catholic hospitals, who deal with everybody. And they need to be equipped because the approaches are different. You know, for a Hindu, it's important that their entire family be around them as much as possible. You go to any intensive care unit in any hospital, and you might get 2 or 3 people in the room at once, right? They want everyone there. It's important for them that everyone be there. It's also important for a Hindu to die awake. We tend to sedate people, let the morphine drips, you know, just let them slip away. Difference in approach. We have to be prepared to deal with this if our hospitals are in fact going to be serving everyone. With the Buddhists, we had a similar type of thing. We would take a topic and we look at it and we explore it for a year. We have a public event. Up until 2015. And then in 2015, everything changed here. And that was because of the Vatican. The Vatican contacted me, the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, contacted me and said, you're doing a lot with Buddhists in Los Angeles. We want you to bring some of those Buddhists to the Vatican and have a session of your dialogue here. And I wasn't alone, my colleague in Chicago, my colleague in New York, same thing. So we did. We went there, and it's a rough life, Ed, you know, but when they put you out at Casa Pandolfo, the Sun Palace, someone has to do it, right? Someone. We can't all live in Beverly Hills, so. So we went there, we were there for a good week. We had our dialogue session, and then we were challenged by the late Cardinal Jean-Louis Taurin, who was the prefect of the Pontifical Council. He said that Pope Francis would like us to move beyond theological dialogue and engage in some social justice work together. So we were to select 2 areas that we thought we could do something with here in Los Angeles. So we selected trying to do something to help implement Pope Francis's wonderful encyclical Laudato Si on the environment. That shouldn't be too hard. Secondly, we selected that we would do something together. We pledged ourselves to do something together to make an impact on the homeless situation here in Los Angeles, which is everywhere now. Everywhere. And we told him, when we had the privilege of a meeting with Pope Francis, and we told him that this is what we're going to do. And I don't speak much Italian, and I was too nervous to try my Spanish with him, so I was speaking in English. He had an interpreter behind him. He just kept, give me your hand, please. When he just keeps shaking your hand, looking right in the eye, and you're telling him exactly what you're going to be doing in Los Angeles. He keeps nodding. You don't know whether he's understanding the word you're saying or not. Or when he said, when is this guy going to shut up? You know, he keeps looking at you. And then finally he said, bene, molte bene. Good, very good. Do this. So we came back, and we've done this so far. We have partnered the Catholic St. Vincent de Paul Society and the Buddhist equivalent, the Tzu Chi Foundation, also does wonderful charitable work, and they are working together amongst the homeless on Skid Row and other places throughout the city. St. Vincent de Paul has buildings around where they have their thrift stores and clothing stores and such. Tzu Chi has mobile dental and eye clinics. So they bring the mobile clinic to the St. Vincent de Paul store and serve the people that way, together. Okay? We have, certainly, I've had the experience of walking with Buddhists down along Skid Row, you know, distributing things to the people there. I'll never forget that a guy living in a box there on the street. He saw us. I'm dressed in my ecclesiastical finery here, and the Buddhist monk in his saffron robe. And we're walking down this, and this guy comes out of the box and says, "Well, you're a priest, and you know, Hindu, Buddhist?" And I said, "No, it was a woman. It's a Buddhist nun." And he said, "You're a Buddhist, and you're a Catholic, and you're here together to help us?" And I said, "Yes, we're here together to help you." And his response was, "Hallelujah." Hallelujah area in many ways that these two very diverse faith traditions can set aside theological differences and be able to work together for the greater good. That's the intent of interreligious dialogue. I told you last time I was here that the goal of ecumenical dialogue is to reunite the fractured body of Christ into a Christian entity, whatever that might look like. That's not the goal in interreligious dialogue. The goal is not to meld all these non-Christian faiths into one, but rather to surface those areas where we have understanding of one another, resonance with one another, acknowledge the areas where we don't, but not to allow those areas where we don't to prevent us from working together for the betterment of society. We hope to be able to expand that partnership between the Suchi Foundation and the St. Vincent de Paul Society by adding a mobile shower unit as well. Evangelical Church is willing to lend us their mobile shower unit, where we can bring it to one of these places. Put a nice banner, brought to you by the Buddhist Catholic Dialogue in Archdiocese. Yet another service brought to you by the Archdiocese. That type of thing. That's in the works. Hopefully we'll be able to do that. And then very ambitiously, we still think we can do this. We hope to build 60 units of green affordable housing at a site which I can't tell you where because of the Not in My Backyard movement. We Buddhists and Catholics met with Mercy Housing, which is a Catholic organization that does this type of thing, builds green affordable housing. They drew up the plans, everything's ready to go. The Vatican had indicated to me that they would like to help with this, which means they would help fund this. The check is still in the mail. We haven't received it yet, but when we do, we're going to use that as a down payment. And then I'm not a fundraiser, and I'm not about to raise the money that's going to be needed to build this. Buddhists are not fundraisers; they're not going to do this. But we think that if we have a type of Vatican approval with a Vatican money down payment, then the donations will come more readily. We've also done some spiritual things together with them. This is what I was talking to you about a little bit. Both Catholics and Buddhists meditate. So we were challenged by Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas, who also is very interested in religions doing things together, to do something together. And we talked to him about, we have our homeless outreach. And he said, well, maybe you can come to the Recuperative Care Center at Martin Luther King Hospital and do something together there. The Recuperative Care Center is where people who are on the streets of LA and then become ill or need surgery or something, and the surgery is taken care of at the Martin Luther King Hospital, and then rather than just pushing these people out of the streets, they go to this Recuperative Care Center to recover from their surgery or whatever, and then they try to equip them then to either go back on the streets if they haven't been able to find housing. So we set up with him that we would try for a 6-month period. We would go every other Wednesday night, a Buddhist and a Catholic, either myself or a Catholic layman or woman, and a Buddhist monastic, or a Catholic or a Buddhist lay man or woman, and we would lead meditation together. Half hour of it would be meditation from using Catholic techniques. Half of it would be from Buddhist techniques. I have to be honest with you, I didn't think this would fly. I really didn't. Not because of the mixture, but because of the people. I didn't think the people would be interested in this. On the contrary. On the contrary. One night when I was there must have been 30 people in the room. And it got so quiet and so still that I thought they'd all fallen asleep. But they weren't. They were in deep meditation. And so many people came up to me afterwards and said, Father, my time here is up next week. I don't have a place to live. That means I'm going to go back on the street. But by learning how to meditate, that will keep me centered. and not lead me to despair being out on the street. So this is another wonderful example of very diverse religious traditions working together for the betterment of society. We have other interactions with the Sikh community here, for example, with the Baha'i community. We do some things with civil authorities. For example, you're watching the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
This would have never happened without the document we just looked at. This is a free citizenship workshop. We're jointly presented at a Catholic church. This was at St. Joseph the Worker Parish in Winnetka, sponsored by the Catholic Charities and Temple Judea. They have Jews and Catholics working together to aid people in attaining citizenship here. Last year in February, there were a number of horrific incidents at synagogues in the San Fernando Valley, with swastikas being painted on them and such. There were also a number of horrific incidents at Armenian schools out there, where the schools were bedecked with the Turkish flag, especially in April, right at the time of the anniversary of the Holocaust. So an interfaith organization out there called the Interfaith Solidarity Network put together a prayer vigil of support and solidarity. This was held in one of our Catholic churches out there, where men and women of all different faiths came together to show solidarity for those that were impacted by these acts and making a public statement that we would not tolerate, word I don't usually use, would not permit this type of thing to be happening in our communities. Last Sunday, in cooperation, I find myself on a lot of these boards and things. The LA City Attorney put together an interfaith council and asked each of us to work together to do something to bring people of diverse cultures and religions together. So we put together something called LA Heart, many faiths, one community. Many faiths, one community. And cooperating with the city, we were able then to close down Vermont, right in front of the Islamic Center down there. We had a block party where we had a stage, we had entertainers, and some choirs from different faith groups, politicians, of course, making their speeches. It was truly giving a prayer, food trucks. It was successful, but not as successful as it could have been. Could have had many more people there. And but the idea was to establish a template, then which could be replicated in other councilmatic districts throughout the city of Los Angeles. We have a debriefing next week, so we'll see how far that goes. While I was there, a young man came up to me who has recently arrived here from Tunisia, and he wants to start something called Abrahamic House, where men and women of the Abrahamic faiths might be able to live together in harmony and learn from each other about each other's faith while living together, which is a very excellent idea. Very excellent idea. So there are any number of things like this. Sandra here wants me to push myself a little bit here. Tomorrow, there's a conference, a panel discussion at the Hillel Center over at UCLA called The Art of Peacemaking. There'll be a speaker from the Islamic school, Bayan. There'll be a Muslim. There'll be this guy here with the cross and collar. And a rabbi talking about what works in the interfaith world, what doesn't work in the interfaith world, how can we be together and try to bring peace to not only to our city here, but certainly to society as a whole. Now, certainly you must have some questions, or have I just put you all to sleep here?
So that was about more your event tomorrow. Can we attend?
Yes, this is open to the public.
When? What time?
This is tomorrow from 3 to 4:30 at the Hillel Center at UCLA. Hillel is the Jewish Center at UCLA. 5774 Hillgard Avenue. Yes, sir.
So, kind of just going back to the document. So
Yes.
The Roman Catholic Church, has a hierarchy, so they
Yes.
can release an official document like that.
Yes.
I mean, for the non-Christian churches, either in here or other ones, I mean, do they have kind of a similar
Very good question.
hierarchy that they can release this kind of document, and how can he done it?
Yeah, very good. Two-part question. Very good. We are structured. Okay. Not every other faith is structured, and that presents challenges for us. For example, Judaism. There are 4 different varieties of Jews. They all have their own structures, and they're all very loose. You have the chief rabbi in Israel, 2 chief rabbis in Israel, and they don't have any power or anything like that, like the Pope would have, or any influence rather over the rest of the world. So, but entities within those faiths have issued statements like this. Many of our fellow Christians also, particularly regarding the Jews, have issued statements similar to section 4 of the document we just looked at. The Lutherans, for example. A few years ago, 2 years ago now, we celebrated the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. And I was asked to be on a panel at California Lutheran College out here with the bishop, Evangelical Lutheran Bishop of Berlin, who's going to give a paper, and I was supposed to give a response to it. And she outlined a number of things that she thought the Reformation had accomplished and yet still had to do. And then when I responded to her, I said, yes, but what she said was great. But I said, what you really need to do is also to address your relationship with the Jewish community. Because Martin Luther initially thought that he and the Jews would be buddies. And then when they didn't convert to Christianity because of him and his teachings, he became quite virulently anti-Jewish. And they have to address that. And they have. But maybe more has to be done there. For example, we didn't just rest on Nostra Aetate. We've taken that and fleshed it in the various ways I enumerated here in Los Angeles. Other places are doing it differently. Okay. I saw another hand somewhere. Yes?
Just about schools for Muslim leaders here in LA?
Yes, there is. There hasn't been for years. And then a few years ago, a young, very dynamic Muslim man named Jihad Turk got the idea that there should be a school here. So at Claremont School of Theology in Claremont here, they established what is termed Bayan, B-A-Y-A-N, Islamic school. The idea of preparing people to serve as imams and just other people interested, lay men and women interested, if you will, in, they don't have an ordained clergy, but you know what I'm saying, others that would be interested in serving their communities in an interfaith, or being open to things interfaith. They've been in existence maybe 6 years now or so. So they're just budding forth. We have each year what is termed Intersem, the weekend of President's Day usually, where for 24 hours we bring some of our Catholic seminarians from St. John's. There are seminarians from Fuller Theological Seminary, from Biola sometimes, from Claremont, from the 2 Jewish schools here, Hebrew Union and American Jewish University. And they spend those 24 hours together, getting to know one another, forming friendships with one another, dialoguing with one another, attending worship from each perspective. They come to Catholic Mass, everyone goes to the Jewish service, everyone goes to the Protestant service as well. And we had hoped last year to have the Muslims from Bayan there as well. That's the goal. Last year they couldn't come because the dates didn't work for their schedule, but I just spoke with Mr. Turk the other day about this, and he says yes, that we're planning to come this year.
Do the Buddhists come too?
This is Abrahamic. Inter-seminary is Abrahamic. Okay. With the Buddhists, they have their University of the West, out in Rosemead area. They have the Archdiocese has actually done some things there. We need to do more things there, but we've actually done some things there. We used to have a program called Building Inclusive Communities, where people would come for a couple of days and we would immerse them in a different culture. And we were immersing them in Chinese culture because there are many Chinese in that area. And we held this there at the University of the West. And the University of the West actually would give academic credit to some of our participants who were trying to get advanced degrees. It was a wonderful program.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
We have so many wonderful things going on, but people don't know about
It's
it.
a filter down all the time. It's always a problem filtering down.
So, is there a central place where people can check in and see what's going on? Because I mean, I'm just listening to you, and I know that people sitting here would say, gosh, I could get involved in that, or I'd like to participate, but we don't hear about that.
Well, that's why we have this young lady here. This young lady is a distinguished graduate from my course at Mount St. Mary's and all this. And she's taking what hopefully she learned there and other places, and she's fleshing it here with Paula Ed's kindness and understanding and approval and encouragement. So anything you want to know, I promised, although I'm not always faithful to it, I promised to keep her posted as to everything that's happening. And she will know everything that's happening. Okay, both academically and interreligiously. Okay? So take her name. Take her name.
There's a bunch of Buddhists that live half a mile from my house in Azusa.
Yes.
Yeah, right north of APU. Have you have any contact with them?
What happens in these bilateral dialogues is I have control over the Catholic people who come, but I don't have control over the Buddhist people who come. Their own people do that. The Buddhists used to have a Shanga council, which would be like the equivalent, if you will, of an archdiocese, although no power or structure like that. That kind of fell apart. So right now we're working with Bhante Chao Tru at the temple in Rosemead. I don't think he would have any objection to others coming. And he seems to know every group out here, so. I certainly have no objection, but really, invitation has to come from him. Just like the other dialogues. I don't control the evangelicals who come to the Catholic evangelical dialogue. I suggest sometimes that you might have this guy or this woman come. And they usually do. People are open to things like that. Good. Anything else? Very good. Well, I certainly have enjoyed myself coming these last 2 times. I hope to see you all again. Good luck. And